The council chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive ring of silver and glass that orbited two bright stars. Inside, representatives from 847 different species sat in their designated sections. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few were made of living crystal. The chamber's environmental systems kept everyone alive and comfortable, adjusting temperature and atmosphere for each section automatically. Ambassador Deho walked slowly to the central platform. His gray suit was simple compared to the elaborate robes and armor worn by other ambassadors. His hair had turned silver over his 30 years of service, and his face showed the tiredness of someone who had spent too long fighting battles that nobody appreciated. Behind him, 3 other human representatives followed silently. The chamber had been discussing trade regulations for the past 4 hours. Voices echoed through the translation system, which converted every language into something each species could understand. The Vorath, insect-like creatures with multiple legs and shimmering wings, were arguing about mineral rights. The Kelthris, who looked like giant jellyfish floating in tanks of water, wanted changes to shipping routes. Nobody paid attention when Deho reached the speaking platform. He pressed the button that activated his microphone. A tone sounded through the chamber, indicating someone wished to speak. Slowly, the arguments died down. Hundreds of eyes, sensors, and stalks turned toward the human section. "Honorable members of the Galactic Council," Deho said, his voice steady and calm. "I come before you today with an announcement from the United Human Government." Vorath, the Hive Chancellor, clicked his mandibles impatiently. "Ambassador Deho, we are in the middle of important discussions. Can this wait?" "No, it cannot," Deho replied. He looked around the chamber, meeting as many eyes as he could. After 200 years of partnership, humanity has decided to resign from the Galactic Council. Effective immediately, we are withdrawing all human personnel, technology, and support from Council operations. The chamber fell completely silent. For 5 full seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The translation systems hummed quietly in the background. Then chaos erupted. Kelthris surged forward in his water tank, his tentacles pressing against the glass. "This is ridiculous. You cannot simply leave." Morvain, a being made of purple crystal that pulsed with inner light, rose from her seat. "This must be a negotiation tactic. What do you want? Better trade terms? More representation?" "We want nothing," Deho said simply. "We are leaving. Within 48 hours, all human personnel will depart from Council facilities. All human-operated systems will be shut down. All human contracts and agreements will be terminated." Irileth, an avian species with golden feathers and sharp eyes, tilted her head. "You cannot be serious. Humanity has been integral to Council operations for 2 centuries. Your scientists, engineers, doctors, they work in every department." "Yes, they do," Deho agreed. "And now they are coming home." Vorath's wings buzzed angrily. "This is unacceptable. The Council will not allow—" "The Council cannot stop us," Deho interrupted, his voice still calm but now carrying an edge of steel. "We are a sovereign species. We joined the Council voluntarily. We leave voluntarily. There is no debate here. We are informing you as a courtesy, nothing more." He turned and walked off the platform. The 3 humans behind him followed. As they left the chamber, the shouting began in earnest. Demands for explanations, threats of sanctions, accusations of betrayal. Deho heard it all fade behind him as the doors closed. In the corridor outside, the other humans were waiting. Dozens of them from every department of Council operations. They had their bags packed and their personal belongings ready. "It is done," Deho said quietly. A younger woman stepped forward. Her name was Hyejin, and she was the head of human intelligence operations. She had been the one to discover the truth that led to this moment. "The ships are ready," she said. "Transport will begin in 1 hour. All human facilities have been notified. Everyone is prepared." Deho nodded. He felt tired but also relieved. They had debated this decision for months in secret. The evidence Hyejin had gathered was undeniable. For decades, the Council had been taking human innovations and claiming them as collective achievements. Human scientists would solve problems and the credit would go to Council committees. Human engineers would design systems and the Council would patent them under galactic law, giving humanity no special recognition. But worse than that, Hyejin had found proof that the Council was actively suppressing human advancement. Whenever humanity developed technology that might make them too independent, The Council would create regulations that limited its use. They wanted humans to remain useful but never powerful. They wanted humanity to serve but never to lead. When the evidence was presented to the human government, the vote was quick. They would not fight. They would not argue. They would simply leave and take everything they had built with them. The evacuation proceeded like a military operation, because that is exactly what it was. Human ships arrived at every council facility simultaneously. They came in perfect formation, sleek vessels that moved with precision. At each location, human personnel boarded quickly and efficiently. There were no emotional goodbyes, no lengthy explanations, just professional departure. At the Central Jump Gate Command, Engineer Jinwoo was supervising the shutdown of the quantum calibration system he had maintained for 15 years. The system controlled the network of jump gates that allowed faster-than-light travel across 12 galaxies. Other species had tried to understand how it worked, but the mathematics behind quantum tunneling were uniquely suited to human thinking. A Vorath engineer approached him nervously. "Please, Engineer Jinwoo, at least show us how to maintain the basic functions before you go." Jinwoo looked at him for a long moment. This particular Vorath had always been dismissive of human contributions, often taking credit for Jinwoo's work in reports to superiors. "I spent 5 years trying to teach your predecessor," Jinwoo said quietly. He never listened. He said human methods were too complicated and that Vorath ways were superior. "When the system failed, I fixed it. When improvements were needed, I made them. And when reports went to the council, my name was never mentioned. But thousands of ships depend on this system," the Vorath said desperately. "Yes, they do," Jinwoo agreed. He picked up his bag and walked toward the transport ship. They should have thought of that before now. Similar scenes played out across council space. Dr. Sunhee, who had bridged medical knowledge between 200 different species, packed her research and boarded a medical transport. The alien doctors who had worked under her for years suddenly realized they did not understand half of what she did. She had made it look easy, translating between incompatible biologies and creating treatments that worked across species barriers. Without her, they were lost. At the Council's central communication hub, Minho shut down the linguistic artificial intelligence system he had been developing for 30 years. The system did not just translate words, it understood context, culture, and subtle meaning across 847 different languages. He had updated it every single day, teaching it new patterns and helping it evolve. The other linguists thought it ran automatically. They never knew how much work Minho put into keeping it functional. 48 hours after Daeho's announcement, the last human transport ship left council space. Behind them, lights began flickering in facilities that had run smoothly for decades. Computer systems displayed error messages that nobody could interpret. Medical bays reported equipment failures. Communication channels started showing strange glitches. On Earth, President Taiyang addressed the human population in a broadcast that reached every colony and settlement. "Today we have chosen dignity over convenience," he said. "We have chosen respect over exploitation. The galaxy will learn what it has lost, and they will learn that humanity will never again accept being used while being looked down upon." In the council chamber, the members continued arguing. Some demanded military action. Others suggested economic pressure. A few began to worry. None of them yet understood the true scale of what was coming. They thought humans were important. They did not realize humans had been essential. They were about to learn the difference, and the lesson would be written in chaos. The first problem appeared 36 hours after the last human transport left council space. A cargo vessel carrying medical supplies to the Delthar system entered a jump gate near the Proxima sector and simply vanished. The ship did not arrive at its destination. The gate reported a successful transit, but the ship was gone. 300 crew members disappeared into the fabric of space. In the central jump gate command center, the remaining engineers stared at their displays in confusion. The Vorath engineer who had pleaded with Jinwoo to stay looked at readings he did not fully understand. The quantum calibration was showing errors, but the error codes were written in a human programming language that he could only partially read. "Run the standard diagnostic," he ordered his team. They ran the diagnostic. The system reported that everything was functioning normally. But ships kept disappearing. By the end of the third day, 15 vessels had vanished in transit. By the end of the first week, the number had climbed to 40,000 ships stranded or lost completely. The Council Emergency Committee met to discuss the crisis. Kelthrus floated in his water tank, his tentacles moving with agitation. We need to contact the humans immediately. Offer them whatever they want. This is a disaster. We will not beg, Vorath said firmly. Our engineers are capable. They simply need time to understand the systems. Morvain's crystal body pulsed with red light, indicating anger or stress. Time, species are dying. Those ships carried food, medicine, and people. We do not have time. What they did not understand was that Jinwu had not simply maintained the jump gate network. He had been compensating for fundamental flaws in the original design for 15 years. The gates had been built by a coalition of species, each contributing their own expertise. But the different technologies had never fully integrated properly. Jinwu had created a complex calibration system that made constant micro-adjustments, keeping the quantum tunnel stable. He did this manually, updating the system every few hours based on gravitational shifts, stellar radiation, and a dozen other factors. Without him, the system was running on autopilot. And autopilot was not enough. The gates were slowly falling out of sync with each other. Ships entering gates were being sent to random coordinates or scattered across space in pieces. While the transportation crisis escalated, another problem emerged on Delthera Prime. A densely populated world with 4 billion inhabitants. A plague had broken out in the southern continent. It started with a few hundred cases of fever and respiratory distress. Within 3 days, it had spread to millions. The local medical authorities immediately called for the Council Medical Response Team. This was standard procedure. The team was famous across the galaxies for their ability to handle any biological crisis. They had stopped 17 major pandemics in the past decade alone, but the team did not respond. Because the team was mostly humans, and the few remaining alien members did not know how to operate the equipment. Dr. Sunhee had been the chief xenobiologist and the coordinator of all medical responses. Her knowledge of cross-species biology was unmatched. She understood how diseases jumped between species and how to create treatments that worked across different biochemistries. She had built a vast medical database that contained information on every known pathogen and treatment method. The alien doctors who had worked under her tried to access the database. The system asked for Dr. Sunhee's authorization codes. They tried to override the security. The system locked them out completely. In desperation, they attempted to create a treatment based on their own knowledge. The Deltheran biology was silicon-based, which was rare but not unknown. They synthesized what they thought was an appropriate antiviral compound. It killed 6,000 patients in the first hour of administration. The compound had interacted with the disease in a way they had not predicted, accelerating its spread instead of stopping it. By the end of the first week, 200,000 Deltherans were dead. The plague continued to spread. The remaining doctors sent increasingly desperate messages to Earth, begging for Dr. Sunhee to return. The messages went unanswered. The communication problem started small. During a council session on the 5th day after human departure, Ambassador Vorath began speaking in his native language. The translation system converted his words into the appropriate languages for each species present. But subtle errors appeared. A word that meant concerned in Vorath language was translated as angry in Kelthrus language. A phrase that meant we should consider became we must demand in Morvain's language. Nobody noticed at first. The errors were small, but they accumulated. By the end of the discussion, half the council thought Vorath had threatened military action. Vorath thought the other species were refusing to cooperate. Arguments broke out. Accusations were made. The session ended with 3 species walking out in anger. Minho had updated the linguistic artificial intelligence every single day for 30 years. The system learned constantly, adapting to new words, slang, and contextual meanings. Languages evolved, and Minho had kept the system evolving with them. But language was not just about words. It was about culture, emotion, and subtle implications that changed based on tone and situation. Without Minho, the artificial intelligence tried to continue learning on its own. But it learned wrong. It began making associations that were incorrect. It started translating based on old patterns that were no longer accurate. Within a week, the system had degraded to the point where accurate communication between species was becoming impossible. Council meetings descended into chaos. Species could not understand each other properly. Debates became arguments. Arguments became conflicts. Two trade disputes that Minho would have clarified with simple translations instead escalated into threats of war. The economic situation was equally catastrophic. For a century, human mathematicians had been managing the Galactic trade optimization system. This was not a simple task. 847 species traded resources across 12 galaxies. Some species needed materials that others produced. Some regions had surpluses while others had shortages. The system had to calculate optimal trade routes, fair prices, and resource distribution in real time. The human team had developed algorithms that processed trillions of variables simultaneously. They had created predictive models that anticipated shortages before they happened and rerouted resources automatically. The system seemed to run itself, but in reality, human traders were constantly updating it, refining it, and making judgment calls that the artificial intelligence could not make alone. When the humans left, the system continued running on its last set of parameters, but those parameters became outdated within days. A mining accident in the tertiary sector reduced copper production by 15%. The system should have automatically adjusted trade routes and prices to compensate. Instead, it continued operating as if nothing had changed. Copper prices collapsed in some regions and skyrocketed in others. Species that depended on copper for their technology found themselves unable to afford it. Species that produced copper could not sell it at reasonable prices. The market became chaotic. Other resources followed the same pattern. Food distribution networks broke down. Some worlds received twice the food they needed while others starved. Manufacturing materials ended up in the wrong sectors. Entire industries shut down because they could not get the supplies they needed. Within a week, 42 species declared economic emergencies. Banks failed. Corporations collapsed. Billions of beings lost their savings and their jobs. The Council's financial experts tried desperately to fix the trade algorithms, but they could not even understand how the humans had programmed them. The code was written in a mathematical language that seemed simple on the surface but contained layers of complexity they could not penetrate. On the seventh day, two species that had been at peace for 300 years went to war. The conflict started over a trade route that had been managed by a human mediator named G1. For 40 years, G1 had balanced the interests of both species, ensuring fair access to a strategic pathway through the Orion cluster. She had prevented 17 separate disputes from escalating into violence through patience, understanding, and creative compromise. With G1 gone, the old tensions resurfaced immediately. Both species claimed exclusive rights to the route. Both had historical grievances they had never fully resolved. Without G1 to mediate, they talked past each other. Misunderstandings grew. Pride prevented compromise. The first shots were fired on the seventh day. 3 ships were destroyed. 400 lives were lost. By the end of the week, a full military engagement had begun. The Council tried to intervene, but the peacekeeping forces were in disarray. The coordination systems had been managed primarily by human officers who understood both military strategy and diplomatic nuance. The remaining officers tried to organize a response, but they could not even get their ships to the combat zone. The jump gates were too unreliable. In the Council chamber, an emergency session convened on the 8th day. The mood was dark. Irilith, the avian science director, stood before the assembled species with a report that nobody wanted to hear. "I have been studying the situation," she said, her voice grave. 3 weeks had passed since humanity's departure, and the Galactic Council was fracturing. The emergency session had been going for 6 hours, and the chamber echoed with angry voices that the failing translation system could barely process correctly. Vorath stood at the central platform, his wings buzzing with fury. "We must take military action, send a fleet to Earth, and demand their immediate return to Council operations. This is a matter of galactic survival." Kelthris slammed several tentacles against his water tank in disagreement. "And what will that accomplish? Do you think threats will make them help us? We need to negotiate. Offer them trade concessions, better representation, whatever they want." Morvaine's crystal body flashed between red and purple, indicating extreme agitation. "They have left us to die. While we debate, species are suffering. The plague on Delthera Prime has killed 500,000 beings. Ships are lost in space. Wars are breaking out. We cannot negotiate from a position of weakness. We must show strength." Irilith raised her wings to get attention. "Strength? What strength do we have? Our systems are collapsing. Our economy is in ruins. Our ability to even communicate properly is degrading daily. We have no leverage. We have nothing to bargain with except our pride. And pride will not save us. The arguing continued for another hour before a decision was finally reached. They would send a diplomatic mission to Earth. The mission would be led by Ambassador Somin, a member of the Velostran species who had worked closely with humans for many years and was considered friendly to them. Somin was a tall being with pale blue skin and large, expressive eyes. She had always respected human contributions and had spoken against their exploitation several times in past council sessions. If anyone could convince the humans to return, it would be her. The diplomatic ship arrived at Earth 5 days later. Somin had spent the entire journey preparing her arguments. She had statistics showing the death toll from various crises. She had projections of civilizational collapse. She had offers of unprecedented concessions. She was ready to beg if necessary. The ship was allowed to land at the diplomatic complex in Geneva. Somin and her small delegation were escorted through clean, efficient hallways to a meeting room. President Taeyang was waiting for them, along with Ambassador Daiho and the intelligence officer Hyejin. Taeyang greeted them politely and offered refreshments. The humans were cordial, even friendly. This gave Somin hope. President Taeyang, she began, I come before you on behalf of the Galactic Council to request, to beg, Taeyang interrupted gently. You come to beg for our return. Somin hesitated, then nodded. Yes, I will not insult you with false pride. We are desperate. Billions of beings are suffering. Entire civilizations are on the brink of collapse. We need your help. Taeyang leaned back in his chair. Ambassador Somin, you have always been fair to humanity. You spoke against our exploitation. You argued for our greater recognition. I respect you personally, but the Council's answer is no. Please listen to my offer. A no offer will change our answer, Hyejin said firmly. For 200 years we served the Council. We solved problems. We maintained systems. We prevented disasters. And for 200 years we were treated as useful servants, not equal partners. Our innovations were stolen. Our advancement was suppressed. Our contributions were ignored. Daiho added. We discovered evidence that the Council actively prevented humanity from developing technologies that might make us too independent. You wanted us dependent on the Council for markets, resources, and legitimacy. You wanted us useful but controllable. Somin could not deny this. She had seen some of the evidence herself. That was wrong. It was a mistake. But punishing billions of innocent beings for the decisions of Council leadership. We are not punishing anyone, Taeyang said calmly. We are simply choosing not to help. There is a difference. We do not owe the Council our service, especially when that service was never appreciated. Then what do you want? Somin asked, her voice breaking with emotion. What will make you return? Equal partnership, Taeyang said. Not as support staff, not as clever servants who keep the machinery running. As equals, full voting rights, full representation at every level of Council governance, recognition of human sovereignty over human technology and innovations, respect. I can propose these terms to the Council. No, Hyejin interrupted. We are done proposing. We stated our terms. When the Council is ready to accept them, they may contact us. Until then, we will rebuild our own civilization separate from galactic politics. The meeting ended shortly after. Somin returned to her ship, her mission a complete failure. As she departed Earth's orbit, she looked back at the planet below and felt a terrible certainty that the Council would not accept humanity's terms. Pride and tradition would prevent it, and that meant the collapse would continue. She was right. When she presented humanity's demands to the Council, the reaction was explosive. Absolutely not, Vorath declared. We will not be dictated to by a single species. The Council has 847 members. Humanity cannot demand equal status with civilizations that have existed for millions of years. Morvain agreed. They are trying to take advantage of a temporary crisis. Once we solve these problems ourselves, we will not need them. We should focus our resources on understanding their systems and training our own people. Kelthris was more cautious. We have been trying to understand their systems for 3 weeks. We have made no progress. The human technology is beyond our current comprehension. This is not a temporary crisis. This is an existential threat. But the hardliners had the majority. The Council voted to reject humanity's terms and instead allocated resources to reverse engineering human technology, and training programs for council species to replace human expertise. It was a disaster from the beginning. Teams of scientists studied the quantum processors that controlled the jump gate network. The processors operated on principles that seemed to violate conventional physics. The more they studied them, the less they understood. Human notes and documentation were available, but they were written in ways that assumed knowledge the other species did not possess. It was like giving advanced calculus textbooks to someone who had never learned basic arithmetic. The medical teams tried to access Dr. Sunhee's databases. They finally managed to bypass the security protocols after 2 weeks of effort. But when they opened the files, they found themselves looking at terabytes of data organized in systems they could not navigate. The database was not just a collection of information. It was an interconnected web of relationships and cross-references that required understanding Dr. Sunhee's unique approach to xenobiology. Without her guidance, the information was useless. The agricultural systems that humans had installed on 300 worlds began failing. These systems used genetically modified crops that could grow in different atmospheres and soil compositions. The crops had been designed by human genetic engineers who understood plant biology at a level other species had not reached. Without human maintenance, the genetic modifications began breaking down. Crops died. Food production dropped by 40% across affected worlds. Famine began in regions that had not experienced hunger in centuries. Riots broke out. Governments fell. The council tried to send aid, but the transportation network was so unreliable that relief supplies rarely reached their destinations. 4 weeks after departure, war broke out in the Sagittarius sector. 3 species fought over access to resources that the human trade system would have distributed fairly. 10 billion beings lived in the conflict zone. Millions died in the first week of fighting. The council peacekeeping forces tried to intervene, but without human coordination, they were ineffective. Ships arrived at the wrong times. Communication between fleet commanders was garbled by the failing translation system. Battle plans fell apart. The peacekeeping mission became a disaster that made the situation worse. Other conflicts erupted across council space. Old grievances resurfaced. Species that had relied on human mediators to maintain peace found themselves without anyone to bridge their differences. Diplomacy failed. Violence followed. 2 months after humanity's departure, Irileth completed a comprehensive study of the situation. She presented her findings to a council that was growing increasingly desperate and frightened. "I have analyzed every human contribution to council operations," she said, displaying complex charts and data. "The results are worse than we feared. Humans were not just maintaining our systems. They were compensating for fundamental flaws in how we organize our civilization." She showed evidence that humans had been quietly fixing problems for decades. Council bureaucracy was slow and inefficient, so humans had created shadow systems that made decisions quickly. Council technology was often incompatible between species, so humans had built integration layers that made everything work together. Council species had different priorities and values, so humans had mediated between them constantly. "We believed our civilization was advanced," Irileth continued. "We believed we were running the galaxy efficiently. But we were not. Humanity was running the galaxy. They let us believe we were in charge, but they were the ones actually making things work. And we never noticed because they made it look easy." The chamber fell silent as this realization sank in. The human colony of New Busan sat on the edge of human-controlled space, a settlement of 50,000 people on a world with purple skies and 2 moons. The colony was prosperous, with advanced agriculture, mining operations, and research facilities. It was also lightly defended, or so Commander Kethlin thought. Kethlin commanded a strike force of 30 ships crewed by elite Vorath soldiers. His mission was unauthorized and secret. The council leadership did not know about it, though Kethlin believed they would thank him once he succeeded. His plan was simple: raid the colony's technology centers, steal whatever advanced equipment and databases he could carry, and retreat before human reinforcements could arrive. The strike force entered the New Busan system quietly, using stealth technology to avoid detection. They approached the colony under cover of the planet's larger moon. Everything was going according to plan. Then the defenses activated. Commander Nari sat in the colony's defense command center, watching her displays with calm attention. She was a stocky woman in her 40s with short black hair, and the steady demeanor of someone who had spent 20 years in military service. She had been tracking the Vorath ship since they entered the system an hour ago. Stealth technology, she muttered to her second officer. They think we cannot see them. How quaint. The Vorath stealth systems were good, but human sensor technology was better. Much better. Nari had been watching the strike force position themselves, waiting to see what they would do. When it became clear they were preparing to attack, she decided it was time to respond. Active defense systems online, she ordered. Let us show them what a real military looks like. The space around New Busan suddenly filled with weapons platforms that had not been there a moment before. They had been hiding in a stealth field so advanced that the Vorath technology looked like a child's toy by comparison. Hundreds of automated defense drones deployed from hidden stations. Energy shields, far more powerful than anything the Council possessed, flickered into existence around key facilities. Kethlin stared at his displays in shock. Where did all of this come from? Intelligence said this colony was lightly defended. His tactical officer's voice was panicked. Sir, I am reading energy signatures that do not match any known human weapons. These systems are decades beyond Council technology. That is impossible. The humans have been part of the Council for 2 centuries. We would know if they had weapons this advanced. But they had not known, because humanity had been holding back. For 200 years, humans had carefully limited what technology they shared with the Council. They had shown enough to be useful, but never enough to be threatening. The Council had assumed they were seeing humanity's full capabilities. They had been wrong. Nari's voice came over the communication channel, speaking perfect Vorath language. Commander Kethlin, this is Commander Nari of the New Busan Defense Force. You have entered human territory with military intent. You have one chance to retreat. Take it. Kethlin's pride would not allow retreat. Attack! He ordered. The Vorath ships opened fire. Their weapons were considered powerful by Council standards, capable of destroying capital ships with sustained fire. The energy beams and missiles struck the defense platforms and shields around New Busan. Nothing happened. The shields absorbed the attacks effortlessly. The defense platforms did not even bother to return fire. Nari shook her head sadly. They chose poorly. She pressed a button. The defense platforms activated. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 4 minutes. The human weapon systems were so far beyond Council technology that the Vorath ships might as well have been throwing rocks. Precision beam weapons disabled ship after ship without destroying them. Kethlin wanted technology, so Nari made sure the ships survived, but she crippled every single one of them. By the time it was over, 30 Vorath ships drifted helplessly in space, their weapons offline, their engines dead, their crews unharmed but completely defeated. Nari had not killed anyone. She had simply demonstrated the vast gap between human military capability and what the Council possessed. Broadcast a message to all disabled ships, Nari ordered. Tell them they will be allowed to repair their basic life support and communication systems. Then they can go home and explain to the Council what happened here. The recording of the battle was on every communication network in Council space within 12 hours. Someone aboard one of the Vorath ships had captured the entire engagement. The video showed clearly how effortlessly the human defenses had neutralized a significant military strike force. The impact on Council morale was devastating. For 200 years, species had assumed humanity was technologically comparable to other advanced Council members. The battle at New Busan revealed the truth. Humanity had been restraining itself. The technology they had shared with the Council was a fraction of what they actually possessed. If this was what a small colony could deploy for defense, what could Earth itself do? What weapons did humanity have that they had never revealed? The questions spread like wildfire through Council space, and the answers terrified everyone. In the Council chamber, Vorath stood before the assembled species, his wings drooping with shame and anger. Commander Kethlin acted without authorization. This was not a Council operation. He will be punished severely. But the damage was done. Humanity now had proof that the Council could not be trusted. An act of war had been committed against a human colony. The fragile possibility of negotiation had been shattered. President Taeyang addressed the human population in a broadcast that was also transmitted to Council space. His voice was hard and cold. The Galactic Council has attacked a human colony. This act of aggression has proven what we already knew. They do not see us as equals. They see us as resources to be exploited and controlled. Any remaining doubt about our decision to leave has been erased. Humanity will defend itself. Humanity will prosper alone, and the Council will face the consequences of their choices without our help. The message was clear. Any chance of humans returning to help the Council had vanished. The collapse accelerated. 2 months had passed since human departure and every system was failing. The Jumpgate network was now 73% offline. 300 star systems were completely isolated, unable to send or receive ships. Trillions of beings were stranded. The plague on Delthera Prime had killed 3 million people and spread to 6 neighboring systems. Without human medical expertise, it was unstoppable. Doctors tried everything they could think of, but the disease adapted faster than they could create treatments. The translation system had degraded to the point where council sessions were barely functional. Species misunderstood each other constantly. Simple disagreements escalated into major conflicts because nobody could communicate effectively anymore. 2 species nearly went to war over a mistranslation that made a polite suggestion sound like an insult. The economic situation was catastrophic. 70% of galactic trade had stopped completely. Currencies became worthless as markets collapsed. Species that had depended on trade for essential resources faced starvation and resource shortages. Manufacturing ground to a halt. Technology stopped advancing because the research and development systems that humans had managed were gone. Wars spread across council space like disease. 12 major conflicts were active, with hundreds of smaller disputes turning violent. The peacekeeping forces had dissolved into chaos. Without human coordination and mediation, species settled their differences through violence. Governments fell. Entire civilizations that had been stable for millennia descended into civil war or anarchy. The social systems that held societies together were breaking down. Fear and desperation replaced cooperation and law. Irileth watched the disaster unfold from her office in the Council Science Wing. She had spent every waking hour trying to understand human systems, trying to find ways to keep civilization functioning. She had failed. They had all failed. She activated a communication channel to Ambassador Soman, who was the only council member humanity still spoke to occasionally. "Soman," Irileth said quietly, "you must try again. Go to Earth. Beg them to reconsider. Tell them anything they want to hear. Offer them anything. We are dying." Soman looked tired. She had aged visibly in the past 2 months. "They will not listen. Not after Ketlin's attack. We crossed a line." "Then we are finished," Irileth said. "In another month, maybe 2, the Council will cease to exist in any meaningful way. Civilizations will fragment. Technology will fail. Billions will die. Perhaps we deserve this for our arrogance, but the innocent do not." Soman was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke. "There may be one chance. Not asking them to return to the old council. That is gone forever, but asking them to help build something new. Something where they are truly equal from the beginning. Would they accept that?" "I do not know," Soman admitted. "But it is the only option left." She prepared for another journey to Earth, knowing this would likely be her last chance. If humanity refused this time, there would be no more opportunities. The council would collapse completely, and whatever came after would be built from the ruins. As her ship prepared for departure, she received a message from a surprising source. It was from Kelthris, Morvain, and 17 other council members. 4 months had passed since humanity's departure. The Galactic Council, in any meaningful sense, no longer existed. The elegant chamber that orbited Proxima Tertius still stood, but it was empty most days. Species could not reach it because the jump gates barely functioned. When representatives did gather, they could barely communicate through the broken translation system. Across council space, the collapse was complete. 400 star systems were totally isolated. 800 billion beings had no contact with the wider galaxy. They were alone, cut off, struggling to survive with failing technology and dwindling resources. The death toll had reached catastrophic levels. The plague on Delthera Prime had killed 18 million people before finally burning itself out, leaving the survivors traumatized and their medical infrastructure destroyed. 37 other disease outbreaks raged unchecked across the galaxy. Famine gripped 200 worlds. The economic collapse had pushed 300 species into pre-industrial conditions almost overnight. The wars had escalated beyond anyone's control. Major conflicts consumed entire sectors. Species that had been peaceful for millennia now fought savagely over resources, territory, and old grievances that nobody had been alive to remember. Without human peacekeepers and mediators, Violence had become the only language that different species understood. Some civilizations had descended into complete chaos. Governments fell, replaced by warlords or nothing at all. Ancient cultures that had survived for millions of years were disappearing in the span of months. The carefully built structure of galactic civilization was collapsing into rubble, and through it all, humanity remained silent. They had sealed their borders. They defended their space ruthlessly but attacked no one. They simply watched the galaxy burn and they did nothing to stop it. Ambassador Soman had been on Earth for 3 weeks, meeting with human leaders almost daily. She had presented the Proxima Accords, the revolutionary document that proposed a complete restructuring of galactic governance. She had shown them the death tolls, the suffering, the collapse. She had begged with every argument she could muster. The humans listened politely. They asked questions. They requested clarifications. But they did not commit. The accords are meaningful, President Taeyang said during one meeting. They acknowledge the problems. They propose real solutions. But words on a document are not the same as changed hearts and changed systems. What more can we offer? Someone asked desperately. We are proposing complete equality, full partnership, recognition of all past wrongs. What else do you want? Hyejin spoke quietly. The question is not what we want. The question is whether true change is possible. The Council exploited humanity for 2 centuries. That exploitation was not an accident or a mistake. It was a deliberate policy. Can species that built their power on using others truly change to treat those others as equals? Some of us can, Soman said. Some of us have always believed in equality, but I cannot speak for all 847 species. I can only promise that there are enough of us willing to try. The debate within human government was fierce. Every day, human leaders argued among themselves about how to respond. The population was divided. Opinion polls showed humanity split almost evenly. President Taeyang represented the faction that wanted to let the council fall. They have learned nothing, he argued in the cabinet meetings. They are desperate now, so they offer us anything. But once they recover, they will go back to their old ways. We should focus on ourselves and let them figure out their own problems. Ambassador Junho, who had replaced Daeho, argued for acceptance. Yes, they exploited us. Yes, they deserve what is happening. But billions of innocent beings are dying for the sins of their leaders. Children are starving. Diseases are spreading. We have the power to help, and we are choosing not to. What does that make us? Hyejin, the intelligence officer who had started this entire situation by exposing the council's exploitation, surprised everyone by supporting Junho. We made our point. We proved we were essential. We showed them the consequences of taking us for granted. The question now is who we want to be. Do we want to be the species that watches civilizations fall out of spite? Or do we want to be better than those who wronged us? Dr. Sunhee, the xenobiologist, spoke at one particularly heated session. I have spent my career healing. I know biology does not care about politics or justice. Disease kills the innocent and the guilty equally. If I have the ability to stop suffering and choose not to, I become responsible for that suffering. We all do. Engineer Jinwoo added, the council is collapsing because they built systems they did not understand. If we help them rebuild, we must insist they learn. No more depending on us to fix everything. We teach them to be self-sufficient, or we do not help at all. Commander Nari, who had defended Nubusan, spoke from a military perspective. The raid on my colony proved they cannot be fully trusted, but it also proved we can defend ourselves. We are not vulnerable. We can afford to take risks from a position of strength. The debate raged for 2 weeks. Finally, President Taeyang called for a referendum. Every human citizen could vote on whether to accept the Proxima Accords and return to help rebuild galactic civilization. The vote was close. 54% voted yes. 46% voted no. Humanity would return, but it was a divided decision, marked by doubt and lingering anger. President Taeyang addressed both humanity and the waiting galaxy. We have voted to accept the Proxima Accords, but our help will come with conditions. We will not return as fix-it workers who solve your problems while you take credit. We will teach. We will guide. But you must learn. You must do the work. We are partners now, truly equal, or we are nothing. The first human to return to Council space was Engineer Jinwoo. He went back to Central Jump Gate Command, where the Voreth engineers had been struggling for months to keep even a fraction of the network operational. They greeted him with desperate relief. "Please," one of them begged. "Just tell us what to do. Show us how to fix the calibration system." Jinwoo looked at the mess they had made trying to maintain systems they did not understand. Then he surprised them. "No," he said. "I will not fix it for you. You will fix it. I will teach you how." He spent the next month teaching them the principles behind quantum calibration. He showed them the mathematics. He explained the physics. When they made mistakes, he let them fail, then helped them understand why they failed. It was slow, frustrating work. But gradually, the Vorath engineers began to understand, not just how to maintain the system, but why it worked the way it did. By the end of the second month, they had restored 15% of the jump gate network by themselves. It was not much, but it was progress they had earned. Dr. Sunhee returned to medical operations with the same approach. She brought teams of human doctors, but they did not take over. Instead, they trained alien medical staff. She opened her databases, but she taught the other doctors how to use them properly. She showed them her cross-species medical protocols and explained the thinking behind them. "Medicine is not about memorizing treatments," she told a class of alien doctors. "It is about understanding biology deeply enough to create new treatments when old ones fail. I will give you my knowledge, but you must learn to think like I think, not just copy what I do." The plague outbreaks began to come under control. Slowly. Many more died before the newly trained doctors gained enough skill. But they gained that skill. They learned, and the treatments they developed belonged to them, not just to humanity. Across council space, humans returned to their old positions, but everything was different. Minho came back to fix the translation system, but he did so by teaching a team of linguists from 20 different species how to maintain and update it. He showed them how languages evolved and how to track those changes. Within months, a multi-species team was managing the system competently. The economic recovery was the hardest. The human traders and mathematicians returned to find markets in ruins and species deeply suspicious of each other. They could not fix trust with algorithms. Instead, they focused on transparency. They taught other species how the trade systems worked. They made the code open and understandable. They created councils where species could see the decisions being made and understand the reasoning. It was messy. It was slow. Species argued constantly. But they were learning to manage their own economy instead of depending on human black box solutions. Jiwon, the human mediator, returned to find multiple wars still raging. She did not stop them directly. Instead, she trained mediators from other species. She taught them techniques for finding common ground, for creative compromise, for patience in the face of anger. Some of her students failed. Some conflicts could not be stopped. But others succeeded, and the peace they built was stronger because it came from within those cultures, not from an outside force. 6 months after humanity's return, the new Galactic Council held its first official session. The chamber had been rebuilt with input from all founding species. There was no central platform where one species could dominate. Instead, representatives sat in a circle, all equal. The translation system worked properly. The lighting was designed to be comfortable for all species present. Ambassador Yuna represented humanity.